The Arkansas hills had a way of holding secrets. In the little valley town of Pine Hollow, people whispered about one secret more than any other. The Turner house, perched on a lonely ridge, silhouetted against the rising moon. Children dared each other to run past its gates, while grown men crossed themselves when they saw its shadow. They said the house bled every full moon, red streams trickling down its porch, darkening the steps like wounds that never healed. Most dismissed it as an old wives' tale, but not Clara Mayfield. To her, the story was less about horror and more about pain, and pain she understood. She had buried her husband Samuel 2 winters earlier after a mining accident. When she saw the advertisement for a small schoolteacher position in Pine Hollow, she packed her 2 suitcases, his Bible, and a brave heart. When she arrived at the train station, a crowd watched her curiously. A slender woman in a plain gray dress, eyes that looked both tired and alive. The blacksmith, Mr. Holler, offered to carry her bags. "You're staying where, miss?" "Up on Turner Hill," she replied. He froze. "That house don't take kindly to strangers." Clara smiled softly. "Maybe it just needs one." The road to the hill was steep, covered in dew and silence. Crows scattered as Clara climbed the final slope and saw it, the Turner house. It was beautiful, in a tragic sort of way. The white paint had faded into gray. Vines climbed up the porch rails, and the windows looked like half-closed eyes. Yet there was dignity in its bones, as if it had once been proud and loved. Clara unlocked the door. Dust swirled around her boots, but sunlight spilled in through the cracks, revealing furniture draped in white sheets. A home frozen in time. As night fell, she lit candles and made tea, feeling both peace and unease. She placed Samuel's Bible on the mantel and whispered, "We start over here." But when the moon rose, fat, white, and watching, something began to change. The air turned heavy. The floor creaked. Then from the walls, faint streaks of crimson began to appear, like veins coming to life. Clara stood motionless as the stains spread across the doorframe and floorboards, trickling downward. She gasped softly, touched the red, and felt warmth and salt. Her pulse quickened, but then her voice steadied. "I'm not afraid," she said, and she meant it. By dawn, the stains had vanished. The floor gleamed clean again, as if nothing had happened. Clara searched for logical explanations, leaky pipes, rusted nails, old paint, but none fit. That morning, while unpacking, she noticed a small carving on the window frame. M+E, forever. 2 initials. Margaret and Elijah, she guessed, the original owners. At the schoolhouse, the children whispered about where she lived. One little girl said, "My mama says that house cries blood because a woman died there." Clara smiled gently. "Maybe it cries because no one listens to it." That night she stayed up late, reading by lamplight. She thought she heard footsteps upstairs, but when she checked, no one was there. Only a faint smell of roses lingered in the air. Sweet but sorrowful. She wrote in her journal, "The house seems alive, and I can't tell whether it's warning me or trusting me." While cleaning the attic, Clara discovered a dusty trunk beneath a broken chair. Inside were faded quilts, a hand mirror, and a small leather-bound diary. The first entry read, April 3rd, 1873. "The house feels different since she left. Every night the walls groan. Every morning I see her in my dreams." Signed, Elijah Turner. Clara turned the pages, feeling a tremor in her fingers. Most entries were ordinary, talk of harvests, storms, and neighbors. But as she read on, the tone grew darker. She says she wants to leave this place. She says I'm too proud, too cold. But this house is all we have. And finally, if the moon turns red again, she will return. I only hope she forgives me. Clara closed the book, her heart aching. Forgiveness, she whispered. That's what this house is waiting for. A few days later, Reverend Thomas Cole rode up the hill on his horse, a kind man with wise eyes. I heard you've taken residence up here, Miss Mayfield, he said kindly. That takes courage. Or foolishness, Clara replied with a smile. The Reverend stepped inside, his gaze sweeping across the old walls. This place carries sin, they say. Elijah Turner's wife vanished one full moon. No one ever found her body. Some claim he buried her here. Clara frowned. Or maybe the story was twisted with time. People fear what they don't understand, he nodded. That may be, but fear keeps some alive. Before leaving, he said, Pray in this house, Miss Mayfield. Whether it's haunted or hurting, prayer helps both. She promised she would. That night, Clara prayed, not for protection, but for peace, hers and the house's. As she knelt beside the bed, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. She climbed beneath her quilt and closed her eyes. But sleep didn't come easy. At midnight, she heard it, faint, muffled sobs echoing through the walls. Her eyes flew open. She held her breath. The crying grew clearer, a woman's voice, gentle, heartbroken. Clara rose and pressed her ear to the wall. Who's there? She whispered. The sobs paused. Then came a voice, so faint it was almost part of the wind. He left me here. Clara stumbled back, clutching the Bible. Her hands trembled, but her tears came faster than her fear. She whispered, Then you're not alone anymore. The next morning, while buying supplies at the general store, Clara met Tom Benson, a quiet man with rough hands and kind eyes. You're the lady living up on Turner Hill? He asked. Yes, she replied. I plan to fix the porch. He hesitated. I painted that house years ago. Didn't last long. Paint peeled off every full moon, like the wood rejected it. She told him about the crimson stains. His face paled. My brother saw something there once, Tom whispered. A woman, standing in the upstairs window, said she was crying blood. Clara studied him. Maybe she's not trying to scare anyone, Tom. Maybe she's asking for help. He blinked. Help? From the living? Yes, she said. Sometimes the living are the only ones left to listen. While cleaning the parlor later that week, Clara found an old painting hidden behind a torn canvas. She brushed off the dust. It was a portrait of a woman. The woman had soft brown hair tied with a red ribbon, and her expression carried both love and sorrow. Her eyes seemed alive, watching. On the back of the frame were the words, To my dearest Margaret, who loved too deeply. Suddenly, a gust of wind burst through the window, knocking the portrait to the ground. Clara gasped as she lifted it. A thin droplet of red trickled down the woman's painted cheek. For a moment, Clara forgot to breathe. Then she whispered, Margaret Turner, the wife. And somehow, she knew the portrait wanted to be found. Later that week, Clara visited Mrs. Wren, the town seamstress, an elderly woman with sharp memory and a gentle heart. When Clara mentioned the Turner house, Mrs. Wren's sewing stopped mid-stitch. I knew them, she said quietly. Elijah and Margaret. Beautiful couple once. But he was proud and she had a dream beyond these hills. Mrs. Wren's voice softened. She wanted to see the ocean. He said no wife of his would go chasing salt air and sailors. They quarreled. That full moon, she ran out into the night. They found her shawl by the well. But never her body? Clara asked. The old woman shook her head. Some say she drowned herself. Others say he killed her in a rage. Do you believe that? Mrs. Wren sighed. I believe love, when twisted by pride, can destroy more than a heart. It can destroy a soul. As Clara walked home, The red ribbon from the portrait seemed to flutter in her mind like a ghostly whisper. Perhaps the house wasn't bleeding from evil. Perhaps it was weeping for what love had lost. The next morning, Clara went exploring again, this time into the damp cellar. Cobwebs clung to her hair as she opened a small wooden chest half buried beneath old planks. Inside were letters, neatly tied with a ribbon, the same shade of red as in the portrait. The handwriting was delicate, feminine. Each began the same way. "My beloved Elijah, I forgive you." Some letters were short, others long, filled with longing and regret, but all of them ended the same: unsigned, unsent, unfinished. The last one was smudged with dark stains that looked like blood. The ink ran as if written through tears. "Even if you never forgive yourself, I will always love you, and I will wait until you see me again." Clara's eyes filled with tears. She pressed the letter to her heart. "She tried to forgive," she whispered, but he never heard her. And that night, as the moon rose again over Pine Hollow, the first drop of red appeared on the wall once more, not in menace, but like a message that had waited decades to be read. Days passed in uneasy calm. Clara tried to busy herself with schoolwork, teaching the local children how to read and write, but her mind always drifted back to the house, to the letters, to the sobbing walls, and the portrait's watchful eyes. When the next full moon rose, she sat by the fireplace, the diary and letters laid out before her like puzzle pieces of two broken hearts. The light from the moon crept across the floor, touching the walls where the first crimson trails began to form again. But this time, she didn't flinch. Instead, Clara read one of Margaret's letters aloud. "Even in the silence, I still feel your heart beating in this house." The bleeding slowed. The air grew thick with warmth, not fear. Clara whispered, "Margaret Turner, I know your pain. I lost love too. But grief chained to guilt becomes poison. Let go for his sake. And yours." Then, for the first time, the crimson didn't drip. It shimmered, faintly glowing under the moonlight. The house, it seemed, was listening. Just past midnight, the temperature dropped. The flames in the hearth flickered blue, then vanished altogether. Clara turned, her breath visible in the freezing air. From the corner near the fireplace, a soft shimmer began to take form. A figure, pale and translucent, dressed in a flowing nightgown. Her eyes were hollow yet tender. Her lips trembled, and blood-red tears traced her cheeks. "Margaret," Clara whispered. The spirit's voice floated like wind through glass. "He wouldn't let me go." Clara took a step closer, her fear melting into compassion. "You can go now. You've been waiting long enough." But Margaret's gaze turned toward the window, toward the old well outside. "He's still there." The words froze Clara in place. "Elijah?" she breathed. The spirit nodded once, then dissolved into moonlight. The next morning, Clara rode down to town and found Tom Benson at the smithy. "Tom," she said urgently, "I need your help digging by the old well." He frowned. "Why?" "Because there's something buried there. Someone." Tom hesitated, but the earnest fire in Clara's eyes left no room for doubt. Together with Sheriff Dodd, they climbed the hill by lantern light. As they dug, the earth gave off a strange metallic scent, like rust and rain mixed with sorrow. Hours passed until the shovel struck wood. Beneath it lay a small box, and deeper still, the brittle outline of bones curled in eternal rest. Clara knelt beside it, brushing the dirt gently from a faded red ribbon still tied to the remain's wrist. "Margaret," she whispered, tears streaking her cheeks. The sheriff crossed himself. "Lord have mercy." Behind them, a faint shimmer of light appeared near the well, the outline of a woman smiling through tears. Back inside the house, Clara opened the small box they'd unearthed. Inside was a tarnished locket. When she pried it open, she found a faded photograph of Elijah Turner and Margaret, standing in front of the same house, happy, young, full of promise. Behind the photo was a fragile note. "I could not live with what I've done. Forgive me, my love. Forgive me." Clara's heart ached. So Elijah hadn't escaped his punishment. He had lived with it until it destroyed him. The bleeding walls weren't curses. They were echoes of guilt. The house itself was their tomb, and their story had been trapped in its timber for decades. Clara folded her hands. "You both suffered because neither of you could forgive. But maybe it's not too late." That night, under the rising moon, Clara placed the locket and the letters beside Margaret's remains. She whispered softly, "Your words have been heard. Your sorrow has been seen. It's time to rest." As she spoke, a sudden gust of wind burst through the trees. The crimson stains began to flow again, not as thick, dark blood, but as ribbons of light moving upward, not down. They spread across the walls and ceiling, bathing the entire house in a golden red glow. Tom and the sheriff stood in awe as the air grew lighter, the weight lifting from their chests. The house was breathing, not bleeding. When dawn came, the light faded, leaving behind only clean walls and a faint scent of roses. In the days that followed, Clara felt the house change. The groans of the wood softened, and the air grew warm, peaceful. She sat by the window and began to write in her journal, her thoughts pouring out like a prayer. Perhaps every soul carries its own house, its walls built from memories, its floors from love and pain. Sometimes those walls bleed when we try to forget what should be forgiven. She sealed the journal and placed it in the attic trunk, beside Elijah's diary and Margaret's letters. "These words belong together," she said softly. "Stories of love, loss, and forgiveness. They deserve to rest side by side." Outside, a gentle wind stirred the curtains, as if in agreement. Years passed. Clara stayed in Pine Hollow, her hair turning silver, her smile soft, but still strong. She became known as the Widow of the Hill, though children adored her gentle spirit and tales of kindness. One spring evening, a young woman came riding up the hill. Eleanor Gray, the new teacher assigned to the town school. "I've been told this used to be the haunted house," Eleanor said, shyly. Clara chuckled. "Once, but not anymore." Eleanor glanced around the parlor where sunlight painted gold streaks on the walls. "It feels alive," she said. Clara nodded. "It is. Some houses remember pain. Others, they remember love. This one finally remembers both." When Eleanor left that evening, she paused at the gate and looked back. For a moment, she thought she saw two figures standing by Clara's window, a man and a woman, holding hands in the moonlight. Clara knew her time was near. Her hands trembled as she brushed her hair before bed, but her heart was calm. She had kept her promise. She had listened, forgiven, and freed two lost souls. That night, the full moon rose once more, bathing the hills in silver. Clara sat on the porch wrapped in a shawl, gazing up at the glowing sky. The air shimmered, and out of the mist came two familiar forms. Elijah and Margaret Turner, hand in hand, smiling through tears. Margaret's voice was like the soft hum of a lullaby. "Thank you, Clara. You showed us that forgiveness is love's final gift." Clara smiled faintly. "Then I suppose my work is done." As the spirits turned to leave, she whispered, "Go home." The house gave one gentle sigh, a settling creak, as if finally exhaling its centuries of grief. and fell silent forever. After Clara's passing, the townsfolk of Pine Hollow turned the old Turner house into something new. The Mayfield Home for Children, a small orphanage that welcomed those with nowhere to go. The children played in its halls without fear. The walls never bled again, but every full moon, a faint rose-colored light shimmered across the porch, glowing softly in the dark. People said it was the house remembering Clara, the woman who had taught even ghosts how to forgive. And on calm nights when the wind was still, some swore they could hear her humming from the upstairs window, the same gentle tune she used to calm her students at school. Years later, Eleanor Gray, now an old woman herself, wrote a story about the legend, about the house that bled, the widow who stayed, and the ghosts who finally found peace. Her closing lines echoed Clara's own words: "Forgive what you can, love what remains, and never fear what bleeds. For sometimes the heart must bleed before it can heal." The tale spread far beyond Pine Hollow, touching everyone who heard it. To some, it was a ghost story. To others, a miracle. But to those who understood its heart, it was something deeper. A story about love enduring even through death, and how forgiveness redeems both the living and the lost. And so, the house that bled. Every full moon became not a tale of terror, but a legend of hope, a reminder that every wound, no matter how deep, can one day stop bleeding when compassion finally takes its place.